Hi, my name is Gareth Falls. I'm the consultant medical herbalist here at the Wild Sage. And you may have seen my post a couple of days ago when I was talking about Big Pharma and some of the corruption that was involved, that was in the headlines. I did say that I wasn't going to get on my soapbox, but I had an interesting conversation with a potential client this morning that I felt I wanted to maybe address a few of the concerns and comments that were raised. So my appointment this morning was with an elderly lady, and before it began, she asked me the question about whether or not I was double jabbed and had had the vaccinations. My answer to that meant that she felt she was unable to go into the consultation, and so as a result I had 90 minutes to spare, and hence I've turned to social media instead. I'm aware just over the last couple of days there's been a governmental change of policy. Boris Johnson had been talking about a couple of weeks ago in relation to nightclubs and vaccination passports. But Michael Gove came out yesterday saying that people who were unvaccinated were being selfish. And Robyn Swann said he was considering using the discount voucher or the £50 to £100 vouchers for the high street, that he would only give them to people who are vaccinated and not to the people who are unvaxxed. Both of those things have got me to a stage where I'm getting particularly angry. I'm getting angry because the people who I know that are not vaccinated are some of the most sincere, genuine, selfless, faithful people that I know that are looking after the lonely, the lost, the hurting and the dying. So Michael Gove has yet to show me any of the qualities that these people are demonstrating. Also for Robyn Swann, who is trying to use this voucher scheme as an enticement or as a way to encourage vaccination, it can only be said to be bribery, not something that should be encouraged by any political party for any merit. We have a thing called body integrity and the freedom to choose and a responsibility for our own health. Thank you very much, Robyn Swann. And you will not dictate to us, coerce us, or try to bribe us in any way with any amount of money to try and get us to take a vaccination that we both do not need, never asked for, and did not want to be part of. I will let you know that I've actually participated in a medical trial myself. I'm part of a trial where we become the control group of the people who are not being vaccinated and how we respond to this pandemic and the discrimination that is being practiced and put upon us. I want to veer away a little bit from the theological reasons, and faith is a large part of the reason why I won't take this vaccine, but onto some of the scientific basis for it. Because it is not a guaranteed panacea for all ills. And I think it's important that whenever people ask me the types of questions about whether or not I am vaccinated, that they understand what it means to be vaccinated. Because being vaccinated does not stop you getting COVID. Being vaccinated does not stop you spreading COVID. In fact, the fear is that having the vaccination means that you have less symptoms. So by having less symptoms, you may not even realize that you have COVID in the first place. That means that people who are vaccinated, who carry the coronavirus, are actually the secret spreaders, not the people who are unvaccinated, because the unvaccinated people will tend to get the cough, get sick, produce a fever and feel unwell, and so they do self-isolate because they do not want to be selfish, Mr. Gove, and they want to look after their own health and well-being and protect other people from being sick. It's the vaccinated people that feel that they can carry on regardless and not necessarily take downtime are the people that are spreading it. So we have a nursing home that I'm aware of that has their second outbreak of coronavirus, and whilst their symptoms are less, they are still having to isolate and take precautions because the testing system there is quite good. But it's because they have been vaccinated that their symptoms are less, and it's possibly working, which is a great thing. Big hurrah. The problem is that whenever you take the vaccination, that there are complications and side effects. So we know that by having the vaccination from the mRNA jabs into the shoulder, that we were promised that it was going to stay in the shoulder, and we now know that it doesn't. It gets into the central nervous system. It can appear in the testes. It can appear through the endocrine system, and it affects the red blood cells. So we have the problems of the megaclots and microclots, people suffering fatigue, people with amnesia, brain fog, and any of the side effects that they're getting for the vaccination. Quite in the same way that whenever they get the coronavirus, we have so many people coming to us with post-COVID. The post-COVID symptoms are diverse, they seem to move, they're transient, and a lot of it seems to boil down to the fact that the coronavirus seems to impact and alter the red blood cell structure. So the vaccination isn't stopping people from getting coronavirus, and it's not stopping it spreading. It doesn't stay in the place that we were told about, and there is an awful lot of concern as to the side effects that we don't yet know about over the long term. So while people who are vaccinated get concerned about someone like myself who's not vaccinated, it's important for you to realise that the unvaccinated are also concerned about you who are vaccinated actually being contagious and passing that on to us. And so there was even research done to that, and looking at things like pine trees and pine needles being used to try and protect the people who are not choosing to go for the vaccination against those who are vaccinated. I'm not saying that's right, and I'm not saying it's scientifically proven, but it does show that there are two sides of an argument and two concerns that need to be addressed. There's a big pharma has a big part to play in this whole facade and farce. The pursuit had always been to try and go after big vaccinations and immunizations. But what was interesting is that there were a number of scientific studies into hydroxychloroquine, and it got taken off the shelves, and doctors were prohibited from prescribing it to coronavirus sufferers because it wasn't going to be profitable enough, and it was seen as a deviation from its intended use. The other one more recently has been ivermectin, which again is showing real scientific evidence and papers to validate its use against coronavirus. But interestingly, one of the very few papers that are negative to it is the pharmaceutical company that make it themselves. Again, one can only presume, because it's not going to be as profitable as other options against coronavirus might be. You need to ask questions about what's Tony Blair involvement in all of this. He's become quite a proponent for vaccinations. You need to look at who's funding his academies. You need to look at things like David Cameron and his Alzheimer's group that's funded by Bill Gates and all of these multi-billionaires. You need to follow the money for those scientific research papers to see who's funding it, where there is possible bias, and who's funding the funders, because quite often the money train actually goes quite deep. We are moving away from a state where we need to be responsible for our own health and well-being, and we're looking for the government to protect us from our own bad diets and our lack of exercise. The people who have given us this dietary westernized diet, which is poison and killing us slowly. And a lot of the dietary protocols, again, have evidence of big agricultural companies promoting it, particularly in America. But we've got into this low-fat diet with margarine and cooking oils that are just carcinogenic and lethal to our bodies. We have got to question the government policy over this. We know that the cloth masks don't work. Surgical masks, if they're made right with enough layers, they actually can be quite successful in limiting the spread of the virus, but I don't recommend using it on a day-to-day basis. We also have to question what was the thoughts behind this alcohol sanitization in every shop, no matter what you touch, and whenever you're walking and touching people, that you go and sanitize yourself. What we're doing there is we are killing the microbiome on our hands. We are creating a false sense of security and actually compromising our own immune system. We need to have the bacteria on our hands, on our skin. We need to be faced with a certain amount of both bacteria and virus on a day-to-day basis. removing that internally and externally is detrimental to our well-being. We need to ask questions about coronavirus. Obviously, every death that has ever happened is tragic, and we would wish to avoid it, and we want to be filled with compassion on it. But it doesn't account for this inflated death toll that we have been told about. I mean, if a person died within 28 days, it's recorded as a COVID death, irrespective of whether or not the person had diabetes, poor heart health, if they died of old age, or if indeed they came out of their house and was hit by a bus, it would still have been recorded as a COVID death because they had tested 28 days previously. There is no other disease that seems to be recorded in the same way, and certainly not a daily death toll presented to us through the news. There has been this thing about the press coming against anti-vaxxers and as conspiracist theorists or vaccine hesitant. And I think you just need to start looking at what people were talking about 18 months ago. They were talking about this coronavirus coming out of Wuhan and that it was a man-made virus. And very, very quickly, YouTube and Facebook started to censor those and demonetize those kinds of broadcasts, even removing them in some case. And they were also saying that we were going to come into a world and into a state where there was going to be passport systems between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and there would be places that the unvaccinated would not be allowed to go, that we would create this apartheid system, that you would be freedom to travel would be limited to those who were unvaccinated. Well, I think we need to hearken up and realize that those days are very much real, and that those so-called conspiracist theorists have actually proven in every point that they made to be absolutely true. And we are living in a state of apartheid where we are discriminating now those people who do not get a vaccination. And that is profoundly wrong. You would not go to your doctor and ask, are you vaccinated? You certainly wouldn't go and ask them, are they circumcised? And I think we need to get into the position where we realize what is an appropriate response and what is an appropriate question, and not listen to the scaremongering that has led us to this point. And ultimately, I don't think that there's a big evil entity, certainly not a physical entity, that is campaigning and putting this all in place. What I do think is that we are in the situation that we're in because of fear, and fear of death, fear of dying, fear of getting sick, fear of contaminating other people, fear of not being able to see your family and not being able to travel. And so we are being kind of forced into a decision where we will take the vaccination so that we can address some of those fears. And I think it's important that we stand firm. It's important that Robyn Swann realises his bribery won't work, that my wife does want to see her family, but we are not going to be coerced with a £50 or £100 voucher. In fact, I would rather die than have a vaccination and compromise my own freedom to movement and to compromise body integrity. It is important to me. It is a conviction to me. And how dare you try and suggest that you have the responsibility or that you have the authority to dictate that over my life. So how dare you do that? And I will refrain from using the words that come immediately to mind. And I want to challenge anybody that's chosen to be unvaccinated to remain so, for very good theological, scientific and personal reasons. And for anybody in the government that's wishing to force this down our throats, I think you're waiting for a very passive, very compliant group of people who have finally had enough, starting to stand up and say enough is enough and taking a stand against you. So I am conscious as to where this goes. I am hoping that at least I have made an argument that defends where we have come from. I promise not to be asking people personal information that's not relevant to their health whenever they come and see me. I'm a relatively open book, so people have the freedom to ask me about whether or not I've been vaccinated, but it's not something that I think we should be applying across the board and across this nation. Thanks for listening. Hopefully it has been useful and beneficial and edifying. I'm conscious that there's an awful lot of fear-mongering, an awful lot of lies and pessimism, and I'm conscious that we're in a state that we need to be optimistic, filled with life, love and hope. So I love the fact that we're in a shop where masks are not mandatory, where we have the freedom to operate and be who we want to be, and follow good hygiene and sanitation procedures in the way that any person really should. But I'm aware that we also need to be promoting a message of hope, life, love and laughter. So Mr. Swann, back off please, and allow us to live our life as we so choose. Thank you.